Hey everyone, my name's Peyton from Apace, and we're back here with Ashton again, and we're going to keep talking about advanced lifting concepts to either help you get better than you already are or to get you just more interested in lifting. Can you mention again what you were talking about regarding the Ohio bar, Texas Power bar, and the Kabuki bar, and sort of the differences between them?
Yeah, it's funny. Um, to kind of understand this, you got to take it back a few years. So when I was, much younger, and hungry, and just training hard and doing everything, the barbell that I used really didn't matter as much to me back then. And I think it's because I wasn't aware of a lot of these sort of like differences and nuances that exist within like sort of the barbell world and the difference that they actually make. It became a lot apparent much later, specifically in the last couple of years, when my lifts have gotten a lot stronger. So one thing to consider when looking at barbells is the aside from the specs, making sure that they're within the sort of like specific regulation guidelines of like federations and stuff. Another thing to really consider is the tensile strength of the barbell. So that's usually measured in a unit called PSI for short. And the thing is with these barbells, when you start to lift more weight, especially say on a squat, you'll start to notice that the bar, depending on the bar, it will start to warp more and it'll start to whip more when you're actually lifting with it. And this can actually really disrupt one's ability to like lift maximal weight and to lift efficiently. So just kind of for reference, my favorite power bar personally is the Kabuki power bar. The Kabuki power bar actually does have the highest tensile strength of all of the barbells sort of just on the market, and has damn good knurling too. Really good to use. I mean, I also like the Alico. I also like the Ohio. Totally usable, totally fine. 99% of people, it's good. But once you get into those sort of upper sort of echelons of like strength, then it starts to matter a little more. So for reference, again, the Texas Power Bar has I want to say like 190, 100, yeah, I think like 190, 195,000, maybe 185 to 190 ish thousand psi. The Texas Power Bar is by far sort of the whippiest of I think the main sort of like powerlifting power bars out there that you would see at meets, and warps the most with more weight. Also, the Texas Power Bar is slightly thinner than the Ohio, Alico, and the Kabuki Power Bar. So the other three power bars are 29 millimeters thick. The Texas Power Bar is 28.5 millimeters thick, which is like the difference in thickness is like the width of a credit card, but it makes a bigger difference at much heavier weights, like 700 pounds, say 700, 800 plus pounds. And some people will notice considerable differences in their strength or the number that they can lift in terms of like their deadlift. They probably can do more, and their squat they probably are gonna do less. Um, and then the Ohio Power Bar, I believe, has 205,000. The black zinc one that's often used at meets has a 205,000 psi, which is considerably stronger than the Texas and comfortable for I would say the overwhelming majority of powerlifters to use. Then there's the Alico, which has a 215,000 psi, so designed a little bit better. And then there's the Kabuki, which has 250,000 psi. So just for perspective, the difference between the Alico and the Texas is smaller than the difference between the Alico and the Kabuki. Um, so when I squat 800, say on the Kabuki versus the Ohio Power Bar, I feel a massive difference. Um, and I don't really start to notice that difference until I get above like 700 pounds. Like in the 600s and below, it doesn't really, for me, it doesn't really mean much. It doesn't make much of a difference. But once I get past sort of those really heavy numbers, not to say that 600 isn't heavy, but once I get to like those really heavy numbers, like it starts to make a significant difference. And that's sort of why the Kabuki is like my favorite power bar. It's the most comfortable to lift on. And for me, especially when it comes to squatting heavy, it's not always necessarily can I squat the weight. Sometimes it's just a matter of can I control the bar and the whip enough to comfortably squat this weight? So that's why, in meets over the last, year or two, like I've made very small jumps from meet to meet in the weight that I'm squatting, just because, I'm trying to make sure I maintain good control and stability while squatting, maintain control of the bar whip if there is like a significant amount. And that has led to me being able to create some sort of sustainable long-term progress. One other thing I'll add real quick is with the deadlift bars. So the Texas deadlift bar, I don't know the exact specs on it just because I don't compete or use deadlift bars right now, compete with or use deadlift bars. But I do know that the Kabuki deadlift bar, I think, is like 26.5 millimeters. It's really, really thin, and it's longer than the Texas deadlift bar. So this bar is thinner and longer, so it definitely it's going to warp more when you deadlift on it, and it's going to generate more whip at the top as well. So you can usually, the advantage is that you can probably get into a better, more optimal starting position when you start initiating the deadlift. But the drawback is when you start to get to lock out, that whip can throw some people forward and throw them off. So you have to be, I think, more patient when you're deadlifting with that bar.
So in my gym, a bunch of the high schoolers. So someone bought a deadlift bar and put it in the gym, and it hangs out in the closet. Every now and again, I find it in the squat rack, which is a no no. But the high schoolers deadlift with it, and they sort of have it in their mind that because they can get a little bit more whip, they like the knurling on it, that it's going to be better overall for their deadlift training to use the deadlift bar all the time when they deadlift. Whereas for me, at least, I think that you should use a stiff bar as much as possible. And then if you're going to train for a powerlifting meet where it has a deadlift bar, to incorporate it in later on while you're peaking for the meet. But in general, stick with a stiff. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think one, there's like the practical side of it. Like not everywhere has a deadlift bar, and sometimes you just kind of have to use what you have available. Um, so one, just practicality. Like deadlift bar is technically considered a specialty bar, so everywhere, doesn't always, you won't always find it everywhere. A lot of powerlifting gyms will have it now, but if you're going to like other gyms, they most likely won't. So that's one consideration, and two, yeah, I mean, I think actually, at least a lot of the lifters that I know that train on a stiff bar, sort of when they're not competing, and then they move to a deadlift bar, or start to train on a deadlift bar a few weeks out, just because there's probably going to be a slight shift in terms of like starting position and mechanics, then it's usually advantageous to kind of start using a deadlift, say like maybe 8 weeks out from a meet, or something like that, and to become accustomed to it, to make sure their technique is down, that it's not awkward, and that they can really sort of maximize the width of the bar and the length of the bar, and how the weight kind of sits differently. But yeah, generally speaking, I would say, if you're not preparing for a meet, then there's nothing wrong with using the stiff bar. I would actually, if I competed with the deadlift bar, I would generally prefer to use that in the off season.
Another thing I was curious about too is have you ever used a Mastodon squat bar or just some thick squat bar to squat with?
I have not used a Mastodon squat bar, but I have used, I think, the Rogue one and the Texas one.
Like the federations that you compete in, why wouldn't they use something like that instead of a normal power bar? Because like obviously there's some huge squatters in those divisions, and it seems like using just a regular bar past like 700-800 pounds, it starts to become an inconvenience. And it doesn't seem like there's any significant advantage that you would get from having a stiff squat bar other than just like it's not like flopping like a pancake when you're in the bottom of the hole.
Yeah, I can actually kind of agree with that sentiment. Just because now I am squatting at that level, and I can kind of I can kind of appreciate this argument more now. Um, I would feel like for most, again, I would say, I guess for most people it probably doesn't matter, but for people that are squatting, above 600-700 pounds, like it might really matter. Like I know for me it matters. The couple of times I've used the squat bar, man, like it was just so much easier to squat with the weight, and it was just so much more fluid. Like I really don't understand all of the sort of the science behind the squat bar, because from my understanding, all of them don't necessarily have like super high tensile strength. I don't know if it's like the way it's like designed and the thickness and other sort of factors that prevent it from warping more. But I've noticed that especially as I gain weight, like above 200 pounds, that like one, a squat bar just sits comfortably as hell on my back. So it feels phenomenal when I squat with it. And it usually, in warping and like whip, usually wasn't as much of an issue when I was like, when I used it a couple of times. Um, I do think that because now, raw powerlifting is starting to become a bigger thing, and there are like more and more people popping up, especially like even how like in the 220s and the 242s, that are squatting, over 650, over 700. There's some dudes out there that are doing it now, and it probably gonna continue to grow. There's probably gonna be more people doing it. Um, and as it grows, I don't know. I mean, I think that at least for the heavier male weight classes, like above like 198, I think that using a squat bar for those heavier squats may or may not be a bad idea. The only thing that I want is just kind of like uniformity across federations, just so that way comparisons would be sort of easier, because I see like the all-time world record right now in squat in like the 242, I think, or 220, sorry. In 220, I think is like 837. I think Joel Sullivan has it. And I've squatted over 800 in a few meets now, including at 220. But it's just kind of like, and it's not taking away from his record, because, it's legitimate. It was a beautiful squat. I saw it. And I watched it a bunch of times. It was really impressive. But like being able to, if I like had the advantage of being able to use a squat bar in a meet, I probably would lift more weight. Not because I'm like stronger or anything, but because there's less sort of issues with like warp whip and stuff like that, and it sits more comfortably on my back, so I can just squat. I can actually squat closer to what sort of my true potential probably is kind of the way that I conceptualize it.
There's another factor too on that. And I'm not being funny, but it's going to sound like I'm trying to be funny. The love factor of a squat bar. Because those things are so beautiful, and and like the way they sit and the lack of whip, like just my pure excitement from being able to squat with like a Mastodon squat bar, for example. That's the one I used to have, so that's what I'm familiar with. It it's night and day. I probably get 20, 30 pounds just because of like how much more I love the squat and like the lack of worry of whip and things like that when I'm at the bottom. I know that sounds funny, but I swear it's a thing. Same thing with like the deadlift bar. Like just the love of the deadlift bar gives me more just because I love it.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, when I squat on a squat bar, it's so much more comfortable. Like I remember, um, I was gonna do an untested meet last year, because they were kind of like putting in together a lot of tested and untested lifters, but a whole lot of stuff happened with the USAPL, the IPF, and a whole lot of stuff got messy, and so a lot of us, pulled out of that meet, for good reason, but a lot of us did pull out of those meets. But so I trained on the squat bar a couple of sessions, and damn, dude, it felt amazing. Like I was like, I'm gonna squat a massive PR. This is gonna be great. Like it's not even like like whip isn't an issue right now. Like the bar is not really warping. It sits really really nice on my back. I have a very good shelf for it, but since I didn't compete in that meet, that kind of got nixed, and that was unfortunate. But yeah, no, I agree. Squat bar is definitely way more comfortable to squat with, especially in I think one, if you're heavier, and two, in loads like of excess of like 700, 600. It makes it even even lower loads. It can make a difference too, I think, for some people. Um, but but yeah, I know some people don't like the squat bar, but I know those people tend to be a bit on like the smaller or lighter side. And I'm not really sure like within like the sort of female lifting world, if there's like more issues with it or not, just because of like sort of the anatomical differences overall. So I'm not sure, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's also another thing too with the squat bar being so long. There's a lot of guys, especially start getting like the 6'6", 6'9" monsters. They're not able to get like with a normal bar, get their hands all the way in. So they've got some extra room because I'm not sure where Ray Williams' arms or hands are when he's squatting on a bar, but I'd be surprised if it wasn't on the collars or the outside part.
Probably on the collar, if I remember correctly. See, because I saw him squat at the Virginia Pro. His grip has to be wider because he's a wide guy. And he was like, I think he weighed in at like 418 or 420. So yeah, just having that much weight, and at his height, he's probably like 6 feet even. So he's not even like 6'6" or 6'9". He's probably like 5'11", 6 feet. So his hands have to be kind of at that body weight. He's not going to be able to get in.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever told you this, but there's a local college like 20 miles down the road, and that's where he went to college. So like here in my hometown, and then like literally the next town over is where he went. And it was, man, if he would have been doing it like when I was powerlifting, like same time, oh, that would have been, I would have driven up there every day to train with him. I would have harassed him until he let me train with him. But yeah, I found out actually I messaged him one time. I was like, "Hey, like you were right down the road from me. That's so cool." And like he responded back, but I always had like a feeling of it's nice when someone around your home area has hit the heights of whatever sport you're involved in or activity. There's kind of like that camaraderie from the geographical location, which is kind of neat. But yeah, I was always happy about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Ray's an awesome guy, especially getting to kind of chat with him a little bit in person and stuff. I think, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I like him too. I used to love watching his videos. There was always like the he was always in that corner with the monolift, and for a long time, I don't know where he is now. I haven't seen his videos in a while, but I remember watching him and just being amazed and just like all the plates just stacked up. It was crazy.
Yeah, yeah. No, man, yeah, and then seeing him squat at the Virginia Pro was something else too.
Who else have you watched that just blew you away with their lifting? Whether it was like their intensity or their technique or just their like aura about them.
I would say, I'm gonna say this. I'm very difficult to impress. Um, but there are a couple people over time that I've come across that were super impressive to me. So one is that off the top of my head, immediately I can think of is Dan Griggs. Seeing him, deadlift in person, it's just like, oh shit, this just got real. Because he I mean, phenomenal, technique, very consistent and composed under a whole lot of weight, and it's impressive to watch. I mean, it's really cool to watch, and no one else is doing that. Not like he does it. So I got to give that to him. Let's see who else. Seeing yeah, Jamar Royster. Seeing him squat in person. He's the pancake god on Instagram. Seeing him squat in person is, again, it's kind of a similar thing. He very composed. Takes a lot of weight, puts it on his back. And just like crushes it, especially at such at a lower body weight. Um, the weights that he's squatting, like and on a power bar, not a squat bar, and tested and everything else, like it's tremendous. It's impressive. I would say he's probably one of pound for pound one of the best squatters in the world, especially on a really good day. Um, and my friend Bob, yeah, Bob, and a lot of these guys are on my. They live with me on my team. Actually, they are impressive to me. So there's a bit of bias there, but Bob is extraordinarily impressive. He has made tremendous progress in the past like year, 2 years. He's kind of hitting a similar stride that I hit back in 2020, where it just blew the hell up. I mean, he's really blown up. Like he's pulled 832 in training. He's benched I think 501. He's squatted I think probably like mid 700s. And he's in the 220 weight class. Tested as well. Guy is phenomenal. Super impressive. Petrie, same thing. We competed at the Virginia Pro. He put up like a high 1900s total, and he weighed like what, like 207, like I think it's sub 208. And if he had like cut a couple pounds and competed in the IPF, that's like literally that's above the IPF world record by quite a bit. Um, again, just phenomenal, impressive talent on that team. Impressive lifters, some of the best in the drug tested game right now, I would say, and just really getting close to that level of maybe even being the best overall. Um, so yeah, I would say, yeah, Brandon Petrie, Bob Matthews, Jamar Royster, Dan Griggs, um, Joe Sullivan's squat is also very impressive, and watching what's his name? There's a guy named there's three of them. There's Johnny Harris. There's a on Instagram Thomas Davis TD Smash, and then what's his name? Julius Maddox. Watching those three bench press, yeah, phenomenal, phenomenal. That's always really super interesting to me because I'm like, damn, like when I watch like squat or deadlift, I'm kind of like I look at it, and I'm like, if I can't do it, I'm like I can probably do that at some point. But when I watch, Julius Maddox, bench 793 pounds, I'm like, okay, like that is, because that's one of those things where it's just like literally nobody else like has ever even come close to this. This is crazy shit. Um, so yeah, I would say
I
that
can't
kind of
even
group of people.
fathom a 700s for the bench press. I mean, like my best ever deadlift was 735, and thinking about taking that amount of weight, sitting down on the bench, and holding it over my chest, coming down and coming back up. Wow. Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy to think about. I can't imagine it.
Phenomenal, man. And those guys are all considerably large. Johnny Harris actually he missed I think 722 recently on account of like some technicalities, but he like locked it out and everything. 722 pounds, and I think he was a 308 that day. So I think he's the lightest man in history to bench 700 pounds. Um, and then of course Julius Maddox, I think when he put up his big benches, he's like 465, 463 pounds. Same thing with Thomas Davis, well over 400 pounds. So like these are huge dudes. Um, so there has to be some tremendous sort of strength and power that comes with that mass. But yeah, super impressive.
I don't think a lot of people, yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize how big those dudes are until you see them in person. Like videos, pictures do not do them justice. You'll sit next to them and it's like, you've got like where the neck is, and then there's like a full 2 feet of like mass in front of them before it's the chest, and it's just they're so thick. I mean, it's not actually 2 feet, but you get what I mean. And like you just sit next to them, and they're just like a refrigerator right there next to you, and yeah, and it's intimidating. I mean, I've been around. Um, there was a IFBB pro Justin Compton that I met in person one time, and I mean, it's just like I feel fear in me a little bit just being around them because they're so large, and I just know that like like I know like huge guys aren't like best fighters or whatnot, but there's still like an intimidation around it of like that man could put the end of me if he wanted to, no problem.
Yeah, I remember I met Thomas Davis in person at the Arnold. Such an awesome guy. I always like hearing from him. He's a very nice man. Um, you know, Met him in person. The guy was, for lack of better words, he was fucking huge. Like, huge. I mean, the guy's like maybe 6'3" and like over 400 pounds. Like, dude's huge. Because I met a lot of strongman competitors at the Arnold too, and I mean he was like that size, maybe heavier than a lot of them. He was huge, you know. And he told me I looked big. I was like, dude, I like, dude, if I'm big, what are you, But yeah, yeah, but also super awesome guy, super awesome.
They're always the friendliest. The bigger they are, the friendlier they are. That's always how it goes.
Same thing with a lot of the strongman competitors. A lot of them were they were cool dudes. Laid back. You know, they were intense when they need to be, and otherwise, most of them are just pretty chill guys. Good crowd for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're always a lot of fun, especially at all the competitions. It's always a lot of camaraderie and good times. That's something I've been talking about this on Twitter a little bit lately of like encouraging people to go to competitions to get more excited about just lifting in general because you've got a purpose for why you're lifting and it gives you something to do. And with these competitions, I try to explain to people that like most competitions that you go to, whether it's CrossFit, powerlifting, strongman, whatever it is, it's normally a bunch of beginner lifters. And then there might be a crew that's really good, But once you get around them and you go to the competition, you realize that they're just tickled to death that you're interested in the sport and that you showed up to compete. And they're just so happy about it. And they don't care what you're doing. They don't care what it looks like. If anything, they just want to help you get better so that you enjoy it more. But I've been trying to encourage people to hey, just sign up and go try it, or at least just show up and visit. And you'll realize that it's not a bunch of scary guys that judge everyone. They just want everyone else to come along.
Yeah, man. Like I think at those, when I'm at like competitions, even like smaller or local level competitions, if I'm competing with people who are brand new to the sport who have never met me in their life, I love that, and getting to kind of hang out with them and kind of help them in the background, if they need it or if they want it, and kind of just watching them get out there and get excited for the first time, like hitting these attempts and stuff. It's magical, man. It's magical, and um, if anyone has any any interest in it, they should definitely try it out. I would say, most of us, I would say, are pretty welcoming for the most part. At least at a lot of the meets I've been to. Yeah, like with every other sport, with everything, there are some douchebags out there. But I would say for the most part, most people, the more the merrier. Come on in, have fun with us, join in. We're not trying to gatekeep anything. I'm not trying to gatekeep anything, because that's also like the future, potentially the future talent of the sport that you might try to be gatekeeping from. Like for instance, some dudes could show up to local meets, put up some pretty respectable numbers, and in a few years could be like the guy, the man, and hit some big stuff. But if you're, gatekeeping, and if you're being, an ass, and not showing them a good time, and then just kind of making it a sour, giving them kind of a sour experience, leaving a bad taste in their mouth, then you're kicking some of the future talent out there, man. You gotta think about those things. Case in point, um, you know, you're familiar with Russell Orhe, right? Russell on Instagram.
I'm not.
He's the USAPL reigning 183 181 champion and IPF world champion as well.
What's his total?
Uh, Totals like mid 1800s. Definitely has potential for like 19 plus. I think he's just kind of working up to it. It's probably really difficult to do at that lower body weight, but pretty impressive dude. And has won an IPF world championship, has won multiple national titles now. Um, and I saw him, met him at his first meet back in 2016, I think it was, or 2015 even actually. I think it was 2015, like the end of 2015. It was one of those earlier years when powerlifting was just starting to get a little bit more people coming in. Um, Saw him at one of his first meets. He was lifting beltless and I think sleeveless. Um, did not have a lot of equipment with him, and put up some pretty respectable numbers. Like the guy was strong. He was very muscular. He was a 183. I think it was 183 then. 183 lifter, and I just turned to somebody and I'm like, if this guy sticks with it, he's going to be a world champion. And I met him and chatted with him just a little bit that day. I think he was very down to earth, very chill and stuff like that. And lo and behold, like clockwork, like 2-3 years later, wins Open Nationals and becomes world champion. you know, um, Guy got into powerlifting. He had a great time. He enjoyed it. He happened to be some of like the top tested talent like in the sport.
Yeah, it's crazy too how at least with powerlifting, it doesn't always take that long. Especially if you're coming in with a lot of muscle mass already, like to just get the full strength potential.
If you already have size, or if you've already been lifting, or doing activity sports and stuff like that, like I think you can probably push further faster up the ranks.
And I think a lot of times in general, I think a lot of lifters shoot themselves in the foot because they don't train properly. But I mean, for almost everyone, unless you're like teeny tiny, I mean, getting a 500-pound deadlift is not like that far out of reach, and it's pretty achievable within a couple years. For some people, even faster. Um,
I would say, yeah, man. If you're like, even if you're in the 165 like or 181 weight class and up, like a lot of, I would say a lot of people can hit 500 pounds probably, as long as like assuming that they're healthy, they train, and and don't really have like any sort of like major like health issues that might prevent them from lifting or whatever, like if they just train and they do it for a while and put on some muscle, like I would say a lot of people can probably deadlift 500 pounds.
I've certainly seen a lot of people do it that, are sort of like unassuming when you look at them and you're like, oh, wow, all right.
Yeah, like I've seen very skinny dudes like deadlift 500 pounds, like very skinny dudes, like small looking dudes, like you know pull 500 pounds like it was nobody's business.
Yeah. And like kind of like full disclaimer. I mean, like everyone has different limb lengths and that's going to make them, optimized for, a different version of the squat, bench and deadlift. Pretty much everyone can be good at one of them. Not necessarily all of them or maybe not even the one you want, but like there's always like you've got everyone's got potential to be pretty freaking good at one of them at least. And then, the
Yeah.
better your anatomical position, the more lucky you are to be able to snag two or three.
Yep. Yep. And the more muscle mass you have, if you're not better at one of them, that muscle mass can kind of help to alleviate to ameliorate that issue. One thing I will say, kind of not going to get off on a super long tangent, but I'm just going to say this. I think the things that make the best powerlifters the best, in order. I think one is leverage. Two is muscle mass, bone density, things like that. But I would just muscle mass to keep it simple. And three, I would say technique. In that order, I think those are probably the three more important things for top level powerlifters that I've like just kind of noticed over the years, watching people compete, watching people as they come and go. Because I've been in it for a while now, as you know. Um, Leverage is definitely huge. We can't underestimate that. I mean, there are some people who literally, they can't bench, maybe over 315, but they can deadlift 700 plus, you know. And there's like some significant, leverages, there, for like deadlift. But lifters who generally have pretty good like overall leverages and can be really good at like maybe two of the lifts, especially, or decent at all three, like that's a big deal. And if you have muscle mass, so if you have, say decent leverages, but you have a lot of muscle mass and you've been training a long time, probably going to be pretty strong. I know in my case, like when I see lifters who have like really good leverages, like in deadlift or in squat or in bench, when I compare mine, like comparatively, I would say my leverages aren't like sort of like super top tier, but they're good. I would say they're good, but they're not like top tier. Because there are people who have crazy leverages out there. But I would say I have so much like muscle mass and like thickness and density that it kind of makes up for that in some ways. Because even when I bench, like I have like over 6 foot wingspan. So I travel pretty far when I bench press. My leverages for bench aren't that great, but I have pretty good upper body musculature, and I'm able to bench like pretty decently, and at least at like a top level, like competitively, I can bench pretty decently, and same thing sort of like with squat. I have a lot of like muscle mass like on like my legs, glutes, everything, and then same thing, like with deadlift. Deadlift, I would say with the longer wingspan, pretty good leverage for deadlift. Again, not like the craziest I've seen or the best, but pretty good. And I have, a lot of like muscle on, well, my rectors, my lats, and again, like legs and, posterior chain. So, all those things kind of to say and combined, makes me a pretty good, power lifter. And I've been training a long time. So,
Yeah, that does help.
yeah, to build that thickness, I think, and that density and stuff like that, just training for years and years, I think is really one of the only ways you can kind of achieve that.
Have you ever spent periods of time where you were more in just a bodybuilding style methodology compared to powerlifting? Or have you always pretty much been more powerlifting with your training?
I would say I've always kind of been like both, to be honest. Like, I mean, I always do accessories and I always do other stuff. And I train in other ways and I do like calisthenics or cardio or whatever, like I've like over the years I've done all that stuff like quite a bit. Um, I mean, even now to this day, man, like when I go train, I still hit like accessories pretty hard. sometimes harder than the big three. Um, just depending. It's a good way to just get sort of additional stimulus to push things and to push things more safely. There's lots of tools out there that I think people might fail to take advantage of, especially at a top level. Oh well, I need hyper specificity. These other things matter a little less at this point. I get it. Like I get that school of thought specificity is important, and to get better at it, you just need to do it directly. But also, if you find that you have like nagging injuries, or you can only handle a certain amount of volume before you start to kind of break down, then it's good to really incorporate a lot of accessory work that you can push still and push more safely and still get really good returns on your big three. um, that's what I do. Works.
So to try and like articulate that a little bit more, are you basically saying that like if you're noticing that you're getting beat up by doing the big three all the time, you can pull some of the overall like volume sets and reps out of the big three and start to move it more into accessories? For the variations that would be a little bit less weight, can you give a couple specific examples of the ones that you like?
Yeah. um, for instance, some of my favorite lower body accessories, I'll do my leg curls, leg extensions. I also really like the hip press and the squat press. I like those because there's more sort of versatility with positioning, and I can hit a much deeper depth with those than I can with the regular leg press. A standard leg press that's sort of in like this static controlled you know um, movement that you can't really deviate much from. Whereas with the squat press and a hip press, you kind of have more room to kind of move your legs around and get in a really, really comfortable position. Um, and it feels awesome. I don't really like most belt squats. Most belt squats I think are too easy. Like a pit shark, I can throw on 1,300 pounds, and it won't do that much for me. But or at least I won't feel it. I mean, I don't
Oh,
really
let me ask you a question on that. Let me ask you a question because I was thinking about this. So I've got a belt squat in my gym, but I never had one like available to me before, and I haven't really messed around with this one much. Um, so I'm a little bit like not in the know about this exercise, and I've had a thought about it or a question, and I know you can answer it because you just told me you can put a lot of weight on it. So, in my view, the idea that all of the weight is basically pulling from on your lower back from how the belt connects. So it would pull you sort of into an extension as you're coming down or throughout the entire time, or you can resist that a little bit with your abs. But have you ever had like any weird pain or discomfort when you load up a belt squat heavy?
Depends on the belt squat. There are a couple where I've felt that, and I would just immediately stop using them. I'm not using this, because there's like the returns for the amount of pain that I'm in. It's not worth it. There's been a couple like that. I can't remember like all the exact brands, but there are a couple that I don't like. The Pit Shark was fine. That was comfortable for me actually. There are a few others that are comfortable. There is one belt squat though that I would use, that I would recommend, that is super awesome. So a friend, buddy Blake Lahoo is his name. He has the 181 untested total record right now. I think like just over 2,000. Um, he recently broke Hack's record, 181. He owns a gym in San Antonio called Primal Strength. Primal Strength, they have a belt squat there. I think it's like the State of the Arch? It might be called State of the Arch. It's like this brand. Um, Belt squat is phenomenal. Like you can hit crazy depth with it. It's super comfortable, super fluent. It's like an actual squat. Hell, it might be harder than an actual squat. You're not gonna have to load on a million plates. Like honestly, like a dude like me, I could load on like two, three, like 25 kilo plates on there, and you've got a good ass workout like with that, by itself. Um, that is a really good belt squat. But every other belt squat, I don't really like that much.
Have you ever used a pendulum squat before?
Oh yeah, I have used that one once. That one's pretty good too. I just don't like it as much as the the hip press and squat press.
I've always liked. I've I've only had access to a pendulum squat like at one time in the gym I was at, and I love when I can do some kind of squatting movement and I can get like all the way bottomed out where my calf is sitting against the hamstring, and yeah, it's kind of it feels like a relative to hack squat, and at least that aspect of being able to get all the way down. I know that the loading pattern is a little bit different, and if it's going to emphasize things a little bit differently, but yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I do like that too. The main thing with the pendulum squat though is that a lot of gyms probably won't have it, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's pretty. It's a pretty much a specialty item.
Yeah. The gym that I'm at here though, the shop gym, they have all kinds of equipment. It's super awesome. They do have a really nice pendulum squat there.
What like upper body accessories do you like a lot?
I like muscle ups, weighted pull ups. Um, weighted dips are good too, but when I bench close grip very often, it kind of tears up my elbow. So I'm really careful with those. Let's see what else. Those are already like three of my favorites. And I also like any sort of like curl variation. I like curls. There's some very specific, like I do like mid rows and lat pull down and stuff like that a lot, but there are like specific ones that I like that are really really good. There's like at my gym, for instance, there's like some pretty specific types that they have there that are just like phenomenal. They feel better like range of motion wise. They feel better on the muscle. I think it builds more quality. It might build more quality muscle. Like they feel really good. Um, any kind of like sort of like rowing or pull down movement. I think like upper back, mid back. I think those are super important, especially for powerlifters, because if you don't have a back, then you can't really squat well. You can't bench well.
So basically, you suck.
Yeah, you need a back to
Yeah. Oh
powerlift.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so those are super important. I think those are like really some of the most important accessories that you could do, for sure.
Do you
Is
train
like
abs
your back.
specifically?
For abs, I like weighted planks. I like weighted sit ups. It depends on the machine. I like the weighted sit up machines where I can get like a really good range of motion. Because there's some that you can't, but there's some that you can. It just kind of depends on how they're designed. There's one at my gym that's designed really well that I like to use. That's super good. Flutter kicks are also good. It's gonna take a while. You got to do a lot of them. um, but yeah, more so like calisthenic stuff with abs. But mostly if I do like usually right now, I'll usually mostly do weighted stuff. It's like the weighted sit ups and it's the whatchamacallit, weighted planks. Yeah.
It sounds like you're mainly training your abs like isometrically with either you're pulling your limbs closer to you or you're holding something like with a plank. Do you do any kind of abs that's actual spinal flexion at all?
Um, Sometimes like Russian ab twists, but that's super rare. Like I don't really do that super often. Maybe if I'm doing like more PT, more calisthenic stuff, but otherwise not really too much. There is one thing that I'll use sometimes though. It's kind of like a oblique um, machine. You're kind of sitting in it. You twist to each side. So that's one that I would do. I haven't done it lately, but I used to do it for a little bit, and it's pretty good.
Have you ever heard of the QL raise?
No.
Oh, you might be into it if you start doing it. You know a back extension, right? Like how you can,
Mm-hmm.
the like machine or stand, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So you get in that, but on your side, and
Oh
then
yeah.
you come down like that, yeah. And because the QL, it's like I'm gonna make a fool of myself trying to say it, but it's like quadratus lumbardum or something like that. But like we like to call it QL because it's a lot easier. And but it runs like sort of like on the side of each of on your spine, like kind of towards your lower back area. And but I'd never trained it before. Like isolating it. So I started doing the QL raise. I got it from the knees over toe guy. Um, And man, I was so sore the next day after just 2 sets. I did 2 sets and it wrecked me. And I was like, wow, I've never trained this muscle before.
I might give that a shot this summer after I finish next.
So I went a little while where like I stopped like lifting heavy at all, and I was kind of riding the bike a lot. It was a couple years ago, and I remember reaching over to pick up a miter saw, which is just woodworking, just a saw, and it was probably I don't know like 70, 80 pounds. And after powerlifting for a long time, I really got in the habit of just being able to pick up anything I wanted, however I wanted, and there was no consequence to it. And I remember I threw out my back, and I'd never thrown out my back before ever, and it felt like I felt like this sharp pain, and then I could not walk at all for a few days. It was just awful, but thinking back now, I'm pretty sure it was that muscle that got strained or pulled or whatever you want to call it. Like anytime you're bending over and you're leaning off to the side a little bit, I think it gets a little bit more engaged than if you're just straight down and up.
Yeah, and if you don't use it a lot, and you probably keep it there for a long time or pick something up heavy from there, that might, yeah, reasonably lead to some pain.
Yeah. Do you ever train your forearms aside of
Not,
just holding things?
not super often. It's one of those things again. Like if I'm far away from a meet, I might do more. I'll do a lot of like at home. I have a pull up bar. I'll do a lot of pull ups at home and like dead hangs too. Just for kind of like grip strength and stuff like that. Which
Let's
hits
talk about that
first.
a little bit. Like how much?
Um,
Uh,
well, I mean, I don't really time them. I'll literally go up and I'll just hang for like a really long time.
do you do that like daily?
Yeah, pretty much almost every day.
That's really
We
interesting.
go
So,
like 5 or 6 days.
Alexander Cortez on Twitter started talking the other day about dead hangs and the sort of like the worthwhileness of it, and for your shoulder, because there was some doctor, I can't remember his name. This is not medical advice, but he had a bunch of clients that had shoulder issues, so he had them start to hang, just dead hang, and a majority of them had all of their shoulder issues resolved. And sort of the idea is the way that the humerus sort of like sits into the scapula out on the side. That sometimes they can get really close together, but if you spend time hanging, you can kind of get the space back in it. So I've actually started doing that every day. I like to warm up, quote unquote, with a double arm hang, but I'll take straps and I'll do a single arm hang because my lats are specifically tight just around the shoulder joint. They're the most tight, and it just man it about pulls the lat off the bone when I do a single arm. But after the last week or so, I've noticed a giant difference in how my shoulders feel, especially like there's no pain regarding my side laterals, which I typically do all my side laterals in the scapula plane anyways, or scapular plane. But everything just started to loosen back up and feel better. So it's interesting that you do that because it seems like it's overall very beneficial for your shoulder health, which I would assume that, or I would state that anyone who bench presses all the time probably needs.
Yeah, pretty good shoulders is definitely pretty important there. Yeah, my shoulders feel great. So I mean,
Do you do pull-ups daily?
hmm
Like multiple sets, or just like when you walk by you see it?
yeah, I might do like probably like 50 a day on average right now.
Is it intentional that, or well, I know that's a stupid question, but like, are you intentionally trying to get something out of that, or is it just kind of something that you do?
It's something that I do. It's a good upper body exercise, and I kind of I mean, we don't have like pull ups as part of our PT test, but a lot of like if you go let's say like say an obstacle course or something, a lot of obstacles you might have to pull yourself up or pull things up, and it's just good to kind of have that skill and have it down.
Hmm.
So I just reinforce it as much as possible. Plus, it's not a soup. It's really again really good upper body exercise and not super duper taxing. Where it'll just destroy my lifting. Like running 5 miles. So
Interesting to me that you mention it though, because one thing like every now and again I'll notice a small little nuanced thing that a group of good powerlifters do that doesn't really get talked about, and one of those things is like consistently doing some exercise every single day. And I've seen it with pull-ups. I've seen it with tricep extensions. And then I'm trying to think if there's any other. I think those are the main two.
I think pull-ups are just really good overall for upper body health in general. And like I said, if you don't have a back, you're not going to be a
Yeah.
good power lifter. And that's one way to get back in every day, and at a reasonable sort of like intolerable, workload and everything else. Um, Again, where it doesn't like destroy like your lifting. So I think it's definitely one good way to again build the back, build musculature of the upper body, and I think it's just good, just health reasons, like just being able to pull yourself up. Like if you can't pull yourself up, then
Yeah.
like that. I mean, that's just like
Yeah.
one of the things that I think about.
All right. I'm gonna I'm gonna belabor this pull up point a little bit more because I'm curious about it. Um, so when you do these 50 pull ups, are you doing them all at one time? And then how many reps per set are you doing?
Now I'll usually do sets anywhere between like 5 and
I mean, if you think about it, if you're doing that every day, that's 35 sets of pull ups per week, approximately. That's a lot. That's a lot of volume. Most people's entire like back training volume does not exceed 35 sets per week, which is interesting because it's kind of like, I don't know, that's really interesting to me because that's a lot of volume and that doesn't even count what you're doing in the gym.
yeah. I mean, I do every once in a while I'll also do a set like of over 20. Make sure I still got it.
Yeah, that's yeah, and you just throw on two plates, just get out another set of 15 just to make it feel good.
I may like if I do pull-ups, like weighted pull-ups in the gym that day, I probably won't do them at home that day as well.
There's no other feeling like weighted pull-ups or weighted dips. They just make you feel like a king. It's just all there is to it. Especially when you get the plates clanging. Yeah, I can't do that anymore with pull-ups. I used to be able to, but like I remember at one point like dips, I get like three or four plates, and I was like, I'm the man.
Yeah. I think weighted dips are really, really good tool to build a big bench if you can tolerate them.
Yeah. When you do your dips, how much range of motion do you typically take?
Oh, really far. I go really far. Like,
Oh, okay. Because I've been curious about that a little bit lately. I've heard some people frown upon the ultra range of motion on dips, and then I see others do it all the time with no problem. Um, any any issue for you?
no, not really. I prefer to go further and kind of stretch everything, get all of that. Um, some people, I think, just loading on a bunch of weight and just like kind of doing, it, like kind of doing dips. I mean, for me, that's like, it's just kind of like, it just seems more like a tricep overload sort of deal thing
Yeah.
going on there. But me, I actually like, really care about like building the muscle and other stuff. So I'm not really super concerned with a ton of weight. I'll still use a lot of weight, but I also care more about like, range of motion, um, getting that stretch is what they say.
All right. So with your training, if we think about it in terms of over the span of the year, how
Okay.
much variety do you tend to have in your training across your exercises, your sets, your reps, your frequency? Like what variables are changing and when are they changing and why?
Yeah, a lot of it will depend on when we plan to compete. I mean, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the goal is to optimize performance on the day of competition so we can put up the most weight possible. Um, yeah, and just be the strongest and show up on those days. So, in order to do that, you sort of have to plan around that. Um, and lately the past few years I've been competing a lot every year, so I tend to go pretty heavy a lot of the time on the big three. um, I also always do accessories. They have their place, for me especially, I think, and help to take me sort of to the next level. um, but there will be variety in accessories as well, depending on how close I am to a meet. I may take out some accessories that are like more demanding, like on like joints and stuff. Like I might take out like weighted dips or weighted pull-ups, and I might throw in things, like a chest press or like something else, to just kind of like substitute or fill in for that. That's something that's like sort of less demanding and taxing. That way I can again optimize my performance on the big three and recover for like the meet. So that's one sort of consideration. with the accessories is how taxing and demanding they are, and how far out are you from a meet, and how well are you able to recover for the big three, for the lifts that matter going into the meet, if that makes sense.
So, how many weeks out from a meet would you start to trade off the accessories for something that's less overall demanding?
Maybe like 2 4 week blocks out, like 8 weeks or so. And yeah, 1 or 2 blocks. So 4 to 8 weeks, I would say, is a good time to probably do that, especially 8. Another thing too is I think some people, try to change too much too fast. I tend to find that it's really good, with technique on the lift, for instance, or with an accessory or with other things, or if you're like changing rep ranges and stuff like that. I think it's really good to kind of make changes slow and gradual rather than fast and sudden all at once. That way you can really adapt much better over time to it. I found that to be sort of my experience. You know, like for instance, like if you're training eights, on your squat, like on your primary day, the next block you may not want to jump straight to heavy ass threes. I mean, you could do that and it could turn out fine, but it may be worthwhile to maybe go to like sixes first and then go to fours or fives and then go to like threes, like kind of just progress, rather than kind of making big, huge changes at once. And same thing with technique, if you're trying to change your technique on squat or bench, or deadlift, like if it's like generally good and it generally works, or like you're having like some issues, try to change one thing at a time, kind of approach. I think that's also really helpful in terms of training. So again, these are all sort of considerations that you're making, and as you get closer to a meet, ideally you want to be changing less and less things. Sometimes things just happen and you just need to change something. Like for instance, sometimes like if a certain lift like sumo like is feeling off, or conventional is feeling off and the other one is just feeling better and has felt better, then, I may need to switch gears and just use the other one for the meet. And that's okay. It's strategic, but yeah.
Like, how many sets do you tend to do on the main movement? And then how many sets do you tend to do on each accessory movement?
Yeah, it really depends. Like generally on bench, for instance, maybe for all the lifts really I'll do like a top set and then there's like back down sets. So like on my primary day, for squat, since I squat twice a week right now, on the primary day I'll just work up to my top like set or single, and then I won't do any back down work for squat, especially low bar, because that just like that kind of kills me sometimes doing like too much on low bar. For deadlift, I'll work up to top single or set and then maybe do like 1 or 2 back down sets, because again it's like a lot of weight, and I kind of want to be able to recover for the next subsequent sort of like session. That's also usually an SBD for me. It's like 2 SBD sessions in a row. And then for bench, usually do top set or single, and then I'll do like 3 back downs. A little more volume is safer there. And then with a lot of the accessories, I'll do anywhere between like 3 and 5 sets. On the secondary day, though, I'll usually do a little bit. I might do a little bit more volume on like a squat, high bar squat. That one's a little bit safer for me to push usually.
Mm-hmm. Do you tend to have more? I've noticed a trend where as people get really good at deadlift, they tend to do the deadlift a little bit less as far as their overall volume compared to what they did earlier. Do you have higher? Like, what is your squat volume compared to your deadlift volume?
Um, on my primary day, I actually squat a little less than I deadlift, like in terms of like volume and overall workload. Some days, dude, like I'll walk in, if let's say my top squat is like seven, let's say it's like 722, right? I'll literally do 275, 485, 606, and then 722. I'll do like 4 singles, and that's it. Um, I can take like really big jumps sometimes as well. Um,
Do you say that was squat or deadlift? You said squat?
that's squat, yeah. So I've even jumped from 485 to over 700 before too.
Bro, that's wild.
Yeah,
That's wild.
yeah. I've trained myself to where I can make those really massive jumps now. Um,
Yeah.
comes in handy. For deadlift, a little more on the primary day probably, especially, well, conventional, it's probably about the same in terms of jumps. But sumo, I have to take slightly smaller jumps and really sort of dial in what I'm doing, because sumo is just one of those things where for me, it's like it's very hard to predict sometimes if it's going to be hit or miss. Like, even if things are right or going right, variables are good, sometimes it can still suck, or everything can be on fire and it can be really good. Like, I mean, it's really tough to figure that one out. But when it's on, and when it's not, it's not. Conventional is a lot more reliable for me. But on the
Yeah.
secondary day, I'll definitely do more with the squat. For deadlift though, right now, because I know I've been doing it twice a week, and a lot of the time I'll push conventional and sumo, like once each week, both of them, so twice a week. That has been like for a while it was good, but now it's like it's too much. So after this meet, we're probably gonna just go back to deadlifting once a week again. We may do like an accessory kind of movement like RDL or something on the secondary day, but even then I have to be careful with that because my RDLs are freaking heavy. So you know, that's another thing. Like I was like when I was doing RDLs earlier, like I think maybe last year, I was doing them with like 639, 650, plus like sets and reps, and it's a lot of weight. So you might as well be deadlifting like that volume, but maybe it would be worthwhile considering doing them as like back downs on that one deadlift day. That could something like that could work.
Yeah, I could see that. When you said too much, define how you start to figure out if what you're doing training wise is too much or too little, and then how you go about making adjustments to it.
Too much. I listen to my body. If my body is telling me if everything feels like shit and it moves like shit, like even if it looks good on camera, if it feels like really really off, 'cause sometimes it will, then I'll kind of like know, and just like kind of fatigue overall. Like if I feel more tired, just generally, like if my body aches more, if I feel like a little more lethargic, like if it's harder for me to like get energy at the gym, like if I feel burnt out, those kinds of things are pretty good indicators that whatever I'm doing at the moment is too much. Or if there's a lot of external factors that are also influencing me, which with my lifestyle is very common, and I have to manage a lot of things. So yeah, I mean, just listening to your body, seeing what it feels like when you do certain movements, and just sort of having this understanding, because I mean, I've been on the verge of injury before, and I have been hurt before. So now that I have a better idea of what that's like and what that feels like, kind of having learned some things the hard way when I was younger, um, I have a much better idea now of when I need to back off. Like it's hard to really articulate exactly in words when that exact moment is, but I know it for me.
Does that tend to be like days, weeks, months? Like, what are the time frames where you start to be like you notice the fatigue accumulate? Like, do you address it immediately, or do you kind of wait to see if it calms back down, or what does that look like?
Yeah, like if I have like a particularly off day, like in the middle of a block, say, and we kind of come to the conclusion that it's off because there's a lot of things going on, then we might be patient, see how the next week feels, and if it feels better, we just continue as planned. And again, if that next week feels really bad, then we won't push it. We'll just dial things back, kind of regain our footing, and kind of maybe adjust the plan a little bit. And being able to sort of adjust things, I think, is very big as well, and not being so sort of static and forced into a particular plan with no room for deviation or to allow for adjustment.
Yeah, and I would probably think that relating to that, you have a sort of like a hesitancy to the change because I would sometimes people are more like trigger happy with bringing changes into their program, whereas it seems like for you at least you're really looking for the valid reason to change it, but there's almost a hesitancy before you do.
Well, for me, actually, if there is a good reason, I actually don't mind making the change. Because if there's a good reason, that means I'm either like in pain or something is just not going good and something just like needs to give. So I actually will usually, in those instances, welcome changes. But outside of that, I don't really change much because I won't need to.
Yeah, and I guess when I said hesitancy, I sort of meant like the you don't do it unless you have a good reason, but I could have used a better word than hesitancy. Um, have you ever had so that's kind of like a seems more of like a week to week basis or like month going into two. But have you ever had like longer term fatigue accumulate over like the kind of training you do it for like 6 to 8 months, and then you started to notice it?
Yeah, like so I look at all of those things. I do look at day to day. I do look at week to week, and I also look at trends over like long periods of time. And again, as I mentioned earlier, because I compete so often, I feel like over the last like couple years, it's just kind of really beaten my body up a lot since like 2020. And I think after nationals, just kind of noticing, the point that I've gotten to now, like I'm still able to like train and lift heavy and stuff, but it doesn't always feel the same. Like when I first did back in 2020, when sort of I was fresh, like the pandemic like came through, I was like, like in my apartment for like 6 weeks. I trained like beltless, sleeveless. I didn't lift anything over 580 during that time period. Um, After that, man, 6 weeks or so, I didn't lift a weight over 580 on deadlift or squat. I didn't use a belt. I didn't use sleeves. I didn't use anything. When I came back, 3 weeks later, I squatted 700 for five for the first time ever. 4 weeks later, no, 5 weeks later, because I took like a little deload week. 5 weeks later, I squatted 800 for the first time. And, it was like, holy shit, I feel phenomenal right now. And I think it was because I finally gave my body that rest, that break that it needed. And I think that I'm at that point again, because it's been almost a couple of years now, almost 2 years. We're coming up on it pretty soon. So I think after nationals, I'm going to do the same thing. Probably take a month and a half, maybe even two. No belt, no sleeves. Um, just kind of let a lot of this like sort of like long-term fatigue accumulation roll off. Get back into it fresh and just like kill shit later this year.
When you said competing a lot, how many times are you competing per year right now?
My God, too many. Like a lot of times like five or six, like 5 times, four
Oh,
times, like a
wow.
lot, like 4 to 6 times.
Yeah, so it's like a meet, basically a deload, and then you're going right back into a prep for a new meet.
And it's not even always like a deload. Like sometimes the meet, I'll scale the effort and then I'll just get back into training the next week, like 2 days later.
I did that one time, and that's when I messed my hamstring up. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it's tough, but we've been able to manage it really, really well. Um, and I know that after this year, we're probably going to slow down quite a bit with the competing, probably to 2 to 3 meets a year, which will be like great. Um,
yeah.
so, I mean, I say that now, but shit will come up and I'll probably end up competing 4 times again, but we'll see.
So like thinking about that though, like do you think you could have handled that in 2015, 2016, that level of competing? Like do you feel like your body, like how do you feel like your body has gotten better at handling the hard training and peaking constantly and going to meets a bunch over time?
I think just good training, just years of good training and progressing to a point where you know your body so well and you know what you're capable of and you don't try to, get too emotional with your training or overreach all the time and things like that. I mean, when you're younger, I think younger lifters are oftentimes very, often emotionally charged, emotionally driven. They're going through puberty, and they want to be strong, they want to be jacked, and then they just push too hard, too fast. So many young lifters that really good, and they just don't really like go on with it for whatever reasons. A lot of them physically can't because they literally burn themselves out and break themselves in the process. So if you can survive that tumultuous period, which you can if you have, I think, good guidance, some good help, um, some sound, level-headed judgment. I think you can get to a point where you can kind of do this more. But even then, I would say most people probably aren't as physically formidable as me and probably shouldn't compete 5 or 6 times a year anyway.
I've got a sort of an anecdote to the young person super excitement with me. So when I was like 16, 17, I was just like I always competed open in the meets just cuz I wanted to be out there with everybody. Um cuz like, I could have been like drug tested in the team division, but that wasn't fun to me. I wanted to be out there. And but I remember I always wanted to be the first 17-year-old to blah blah blah, or like the first 16-year-old to blah blah blah. And I was so obsessed with like what I could do as a teen But when I was like Brandon Lilly and I were friends for a while, and I remember he would always like rein me back in on that. And I remember being a kid and not understanding it. And I was like, I want to get as strong as fast as possible because that's going to let me get stronger in the long term because I'm always just getting better. And he's like, no, man, like shoot for like 5 pounds PR every 3 months. And I'm like, what? That's too low. I'm not about it. And he's like, look, that's 20 pounds per year. And he's like, if you did that for just a couple of years, you'd already be in a 2,000 total. And he's like, and you wouldn't get injured along the way. You would make steady progress. And I'm like, no, I don't like it. And because I wanted it so fast, I wanted to make these huge 50, 100-pound jumps from meet to meet. And he would throttle me back down. And then there would be other like experienced lifters, in their 30s that have been doing this for a long time. And they would always say, like, stop trying to see what you can do right now as a teen. Focus on the longer term of where you're going to be, 5, 10, 15 years from now. And everything's going to be okay because no one really cares that you did it as a teen. You might get a little bit more attention, but it's like, are you in this game because you want attention or because you want to put up big weights in the long term? And, I would kind of be like, well, big weights in the long term, but I also want the attention too. And they're like, yeah, okay. Well, and then over time, I started to like grow out of that to where now it seems like, and I still sometimes get that excitement and I go too much too fast. But every time I do that, my body pushes back on me as hard as I pushed on it. And then I sort of suffer the consequences. And yeah, I don't think like there's definitely like that part. And then I've also seen the, like the back down scale from the competitive athlete is the lifter that is in the gym trying to get strong, but they start to sacrifice their range of motion so that they can just put more plates on the bar. Like there's one dude in my gym, like this is a rampant problem in my gym of there's so many high schoolers that train in my gym, it's crazy. It's like 15, 20. And a lot of them are jacked. Like they're really getting into it. But and they even train legs on Monday. It's amazing. But it's less than quarter reps, it's dime reps on everything that they do. And I'm like, no, you're giving up all your progress to do this because they'll load up. Man, I've seen them put 8 plates on hack squat. I've seen them put like 20 plates, sometimes more on the leg press, and they just do their little thing. And but it's that same sort of sentiment of I've got to get more now, and it's either like you sacrifice technique, or if you're committed to good technique, then from there it's just you just sacrifice patience of like unwillingness to just throttle back and not push too hard because it's just the gateway to injury every time and fatigue.
When you're a teenager, your ability to sort of assess risk probably isn't as good. Especially if you're a 16-year-old boy and you're surrounded by all these, jack dudes, and you see all these jack dudes on social media doing crazy shit, then you're like, I want to be stronger. I want to be like that. I can be like that. Why can't I be like that? Let me put on more weight. And then boom, there you are. You're there. It's really easy to fall into that trap. I think most of us do at some point, especially when we're a lot younger. And hell, there's people that are older that are falling into that trap too.
Typically not as long because they're not as indestructible as they used to be. But yeah, I think most people if they just spent 3 months doing it chilled out and correctly, they would get so much more progress to where they would say like I don't want to go back to the way I was doing it.
And they might actually, yeah, they might like become accustomed to that style, get used to it, and they just like stick with it. Because I think after a certain point, like, it's kind of what happened to me. I was still really young, and I got like infinitely better with training after that point. And even like us, like, like we were like super, excited, fired up, kids or whatever too. But even in our case, like I would say that we were still probably more level headed than a lot of the stuff that I see right now. And I know that's a biased opinion, but
Yeah,
even from my perspective, like the progress that like we were still able to make and stuff like that.
yeah. I do have to say I've got some YouTube videos you can watch of me when I'm 17, 18 that are like as idiotic as it gets to where I definitely I had a dose of good training and good structure because of the coach that I had, but I definitely like found ways to be an idiot within my parameters. Like I started doing this thing at one point where as soon as the deadlift bar touched the ground, um I would rip that thing back up and like it would still almost sometimes still be on its way down, and I start to reverse, and I mean it would just like it would tear my back to pieces. I remember like the next few days I would be so sore and it would hurt so bad, but I wasn't like I was lucky that I never had any kind of like spine issues from that, but I certainly earned it at that time with what I was doing, and it was just dumb. And I could have progressed more during that time if I would have cut that out. But I got a um, an X-ray at my chiropractor not too long ago, and I was so thankful that my spine was not messed up because I had been curious if I had caused any kind of like long-term damage. But I do have a little bit of like a degeneration. I think that's what you call it, like in the lowest disc in my spine, and I'm not even sure if that's from lifting. I think it might be from sitting a lot, to be honest, or the combination of both, which is the deadliest when you sit a lot and you go lift heavy in the gym. Um, but the thing that got me is my neck from studying all the time and being on screen all the time. I've lost the curvature in my neck, so it's kind of pitched forward a bit. It looks like a straight line actually, instead of having the natural curve.
The bones in my neck are the same way. They're a straight line. But the guy told me, he was like, since you have a lot of like musculature and muscle to protect like that region, like you're good. Keep training. That's what he said.
I've just tried to stand more because it normally occurs when I'm sitting because I start to do that thing, and so trying to stand more.
How many pillows you use and things like that can affect it too.
Yeah, I've gotten aware when I sleep on my back, I do not use a pillow, and now that I've done that for a while, if I put a pillow, it's uncomfortable. I don't like it. But if I'm on my side, of course I use a pillow. But yeah, I can't do it when I'm on my back. I've been wanting to. I've seen so this trend lately where they take your foot where it's in like a closed toe box or a narrow toe box, and your toes are all smashed together, and then there's like a shoe with a wider toe box, and your toes look like that, and they do an X-ray with your foot in the shoe to see the difference, and it went viral on Twitter with one guy who did it. But what I've wanted to do is get like a board behind me and put the pillow so my neck sits like that, because the pillow like it would be if you're laying on your back, and take an X-ray of it, because I feel like I hear some people like they get mad at pillow haters, which I like pillows, but just not when you're laying on your back. But I've wanted to show like in the X-ray, like your neck is not in a normal position when you've got a thick pillow. I mean, it's perched forward, and it's like I don't. Even though you're laying on your back and there's not necessarily like your neck, your neck extensors aren't holding up a load, I still don't think it's the best position to be in while you're sleeping. Anyways, that's a tangent, but
Yeah,
we
that's a
might
whole
see a
other,
picture of that sometime
whole other
soon.
can of worms. Yeah, to get into.
But yeah, we should probably close up today to respect your time. You got anything you want to tell your YouTube audience?
Keep training.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in and listening to our ramblings. We're a little bit more loose today, so let us know if you like that compared to more structure. Also, let us know in the comments if there's anything else that you want us to talk about in the future that Ashton or I can help you with.